And I just turned around and I hauled ass out of there. I was done. I wasn't dealing with that.
The hypocrisy of the cult is one of the things that turned me away the quickest.
When I turned my headlights on, it turned and looked at us. And one of the things I remember the most were the eyes were glowing red.
I see an orb of light. It is just circling these steps like it is waiting for me.
And he begins to tell them that he saw a UFO. They're basically like, what are you talking about? That's 7 foot up on a tree, peeking around it, and that's where I saw the top of the muzzle, nose, and the eyes. As soon as I made eye contact with this thing, it felt like death.
I'd like to take this time to welcome my guest tonight, Don. Thanks for coming on here and talking to me.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Not a problem. You're another Indiana resident, I do believe.
Yes, sir.
That is some of the compliments I've gotten from listeners, I think it's because they're from Indiana, but they like to hear the stories from people from around the state. So I keep getting compliments like, we're glad to hear people from Indiana. I'm like, well, I like talking to local people because I have weird stuff going on here in Indiana too. So it's nice to know it's not just me.
Yeah, Indiana's got some stories.
Yeah. You want to love
So I grew up just south of where you're at.
Mm-hmm. So you were from Kokomo, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, so you're only about 20 minutes from where I live.
Right. But now I'm up north.
Right. Which is funny because where I'm based out of up north. My office, if I report to an office every day, I'd have to go to Maryville.
Okay. Yeah, that's right down the road for me.
Yeah, so luckily for me, I don't go there every single day, but if I had to report to my office every day, I'd be up there but luckily for me, I'm able to do a lot of the stuff remotely.
Yeah, that'd be a trek every day.
Just a couple of years ago, I had a job that was over by Rensselaer, but my office was in Roselawn. So that was still 90 miles one direction to where I had to report to every single day, but I at least got paid a mileage reimbursement, so it wasn't that bad.
That's crazy, though.
Yeah. A couple hours of driving a day, I was listening to a lot of podcast episodes. But like I haven't been driving too much in the last year and a half, so I haven't been up to date on a lot of stuff I used to listen to. But not about me, about you. So you want to let the audience know a little bit about yourself?
So I do a lot of camping, and I film videos like bushcraft, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And me and my buddy, we went down to Hoosier National Forest, which is southern Indiana type area, Bloomington area.
Mm-hmm.
And we went down there. I was filming a couple of videos, and we was down there for Thanksgiving weekend because I work so much. It's like I can only get off, for the holidays.
Right.
So we went down there. It was 2023 Thanksgiving weekend. And it was already weird. Like, as soon as we got there, the forest was quiet, like odd quiet. And this was our first hike. So we overpacked. It was like, oh yeah, we can put it on our back. We can carry it, because we had to hike in to our camp spot. And, obviously first time hiking, we're like, yeah, this is a little far and a lot of weight. So we stop at the very first one on the trail. And I start laying out because I have a hot tent and it was cold. So you have to lay down a tarp because there's no floor in the tent. I lay down the tarp, take off my pack, and he took 22, was going to go try find a squirrel or a rabbit, and we were going to film cooking it and all that. But it was really weird because there was no small game to be seen. There was no birds. Now, mind you, it wasn't like cold. It was cold enough that you would need, heat at night. But a thick coat during the day wasn't too bad. So he's out walking around. I'm like, well, I'll start setting up the camp. And I lay out the tarp. He calls me on the phone. It's like, hey, come down a little ways, probably about 100 yards. He was like, there's a spot. It's already got firewood. He's like, it's got big logs we can sit on around the fire. He's like, it's a lot nicer. So I'm like, all right. I just left my pack up against the tree, left the tarp where it was, walked down there. He was like, yeah, check it out. It's nice. Da-da-da-da. I was there about 10 minutes. I was like, yeah, this looks great. So I was like, let me go get the stuff. I'll be back. He was like, all right, well, I'm going to go off this way and go see if I can find a squirrel. I get back to the original spot, and there's a big clump of hair in the middle of my 10 by 12 tarp. And it wasn't fur. It was literally a golf ball size of what looked like human hair, like it had just been cut off of somebody's head. I was like, that's really odd. And so I took a picture of it. I might even have a video of it somewhere. But I sent you the two pictures, one that's zoomed in and one that's, you can see my boot print, and my boot is 12 inches long. So you can see how big it is.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, okay, that's weird. How does a ball of hair, because it wasn't windy, and I was like, how does a ball of hair just wind up in the very center of the tarp?
Right.
Okay. Odd. So I pack everything up and go down to the other spot. He's still out looking for a squirrel. I start setting up the tent down that way. And the whole time I'm setting up the tent, I got this overwhelming feeling that I was being watched. Everybody knows that feeling. I'm like, but it was like on 10. Like you couldn't not feel it. You couldn't like just brush it off.
Mm-hmm.
I had a video on my YouTube channel, but I took it down because I'll explain that. But I took it down. I was just like, oh, this is weird. So like in the video, you could see me stop. And I'm like looking around. I'm just like trying to put it out of my head and keep on going. Now, mind you, it's like 2 PM. So it wasn't like scary. And that was the other thing. The whole time we were there, it was super like calming feeling. Not scary at all. Not one bit. And you get in the woods and you're out there by yourself. It gets spooky sometimes. And I spent a lot of time in the woods. But it was like really calm. That happened. I get the tent set up. He comes back. So there's there's like a lake, probably about half-hour walk from where we were. He's like, let's go down to the lake. I'm like, all right, cool. Threw some beef jerky in the backpack, a couple of headlamps, water, took off walking. And it was like, as soon as we got out of the campsite, it was about 20-yard walk from the campsite to the main trail. So we get out on the main trail. As soon as I stepped out on the main trail, the hearing in my right ear went out. It felt like and it was only in one ear, and it felt like I was taken off in a plane. Like that suction. like, whoa, what the hell? So I'm like, dude, my ear, it hurt. And he was like, yeah, well, we're kind of up high because there's a slight elevation when you go in that area. I'm like, we've been here for like 4 hours.
Yeah.
That's weird. So it only lasted probably about, I don't know, 5 minutes, and it went away. We take off walking. We're just checking out the trail, looking at, the surroundings and stuff. I'm filming, just, jacking around. A couple of guys in the woods and just talking. So, and it's a lot of, I don't know if you've ever been there, but there's a lot of ridges and valleys all through there. And we get to the end of the trail and it takes a left, but you could see the water from where we were at, and there was no trail going down to the water, so we would have to walk all the way around to almost the other side of the lake. I'm like, I'm not walking. We'd already been walking for a while. I'm like, I'm not walking that far. I was like, let's just cut through right here and just go down. And it was like, you went down probably about, I don't know, 50 feet, and pretty good incline. Go down about 50 feet. Then there was like a plateau. And then there was another little valley off to the left. We went down in that valley, which was about a 15-foot drop, and then a gradual decline to the water. We get down the first set, and then we're going down the second set. Now, mind you, it's fall, so there's leaves everywhere. So leaves are, loud when you're walking through them. And I swear I heard a female scream bloody murder 3 times, like back to back. And he didn't hear it. Only I heard it. I'm like, did you hear that? He's like, no, what was it? I said, I swear I heard a woman scream like she was being murdered. And it's still daylight. And it was real weird, though, because it was like if you took a recording and played it 3 times, it wasn't different at all each time. It was the same each time. So it kind of was like, what? I don't understand that. So anyways, we can continue walking down to the water. There was a couple of ultralight hikers down there, and they were setting up their camp. And we're down by the water, and we're just, checking it out. It's the first time we'd ever been there to the Hoosier at all. So we start talking to this guy. I'm checking out his gear because I want to get in some ultralight hiking, because after this trip, I was like, I got to get some lighter stuff. So kind of checking out his gear. And I was like, hey, did you hear something about 10 minutes ago? And he was like, no. He said, what'd you hear? I said, I heard a woman scream, like bloody murder. And he was like, really? He was like, oh, that's probably Bigfoot. I'm like, what? What do you mean? And he was like, oh, yeah, there's Bigfoot all around here. I'm like, no, whatever. He was like, I swear, dude. He was like, over at the horse camp right over there, right on the other side of this ridge, they're having a Bigfoot hunt this weekend. I'm like, are you serious? Because we were going to stop at that horse camp and camp there, but it was full. There was like tons of cars. So we kept on going around to the next ridge. I'm like, that's why all those people were there. And it was, I don't know, it just kind of threw me off that he said that. And then, so we hang out there for a little bit, and then starts to get dusk. So I'm like, hey, let's go back to camp before it gets too dark. So we climbed back up this big ass hill. And by the time we got up to the top of the hill and back into the woods, it was dark. And it was real weird, because usually when I'm in the woods and it's dark out, I throw my headlamp on. But neither one of us wanted to use headlamps for some reason. And I just thought that was weird. we're in a place where we've never been before. It's a 30-minute hike. And we were both like, yeah, we don't need headlamps. And it's dark. And if you went down on this hill, you know, it would probably be about a 70-foot roll, you know, pretty steep too. So that was odd. I didn't understand why neither one of us wear headlamps, but it was just this calming, like everything's okay, it's safe. It was, it's just weird. And then we got back to camp, started cooking up dinner, and for some reason we both are like whispering the whole time. I don't know why. There's nobody around us, you know, and we're in these big ass woods, but we feel like we have to be quiet for some reason. And we've talked about this after, and neither one of us know why, but we just felt like we needed to be quiet. And the coyote started up, the owl started up. So we had several owls going, a whole pack of coyotes going, and it just sounded weird. And that was pretty much everything that time. Other than it felt like you were in a vacuum and just super calming. Like, I don't know how to explain it. It just felt really good to be there. It was weird. And then, so that was everything for that trip. We went back about January. So that was November, end of November. We went back January, at the end of January or the beginning of February. That's when the weather broke again. Because after that trip, we just really both wanted to go back. It was just so calming and so nice. And the next time we went, it didn't feel like that. It wasn't, it just had a different feel completely. And we both noticed it. We're like, what the hell? You know, this seems weird. So, but we went back to the same campsite. The first night, across from where our camp was, like I said, it was probably about 20 yards. Mm-hmm. And then the main trail, and then like a 70-foot valley. And I seen on the other side of the valley, probably about 3/4 of the way down from the top, 3 lights. And I'm like, what is that? And he's like, oh, those are just campers with headlamps on. I'm like, so I'm sitting there watching them, and I'm like, are you sure? Because they weren't moving like somebody with headlamps. You know, somebody with a headlamp on, they turn their head. You know what I'm saying? You can see the light change, going in between trees and out. You know, and it seemed like they never did that. They never went in between trees and like that. They were just moving, like just very odd. And at first I thought it probably was campers because they all stayed at the same height, but they didn't move like it. And like if somebody was to turn their head and look at something, it would light up whatever was there. And it wasn't doing that. Like you would see like trees light up if it was a headlamp. But you didn't. It was just like a whitish blue bowl, and there was 3 of them. And they kept moving. Like, I don't know. I watched them for probably about 20 minutes and just stopped watching them because I'm like, I don't know what it is. And that same night, probably about, I don't know, probably a couple hours later, it got darker. It's probably about 11 o'clock at night, maybe midnight, something like that. It literally sounded like somebody was walking into our camp, just outside the light of the fire. And you could hear it. And I have a 14,000 lumen flashlight. I kick it on. There's nothing there. So I'm like, maybe it's squirrel. I don't know. But it literally sounded like footsteps just outside the firelight. That was odd. Then that was all that happened that night. Then the next morning, I'm laying there, just starting to wake up. And I felt 3 big thuds on the ground. Thunk, thunk, thunk. Like, what is that? I think he was still sleeping, but you could feel it because we slept on the ground with just mats. And I don't know what that was. I was inside the tent, didn't see anything, didn't really hear it. It was more of a feel than it was like an audible. And we're like, it started snowing while we were sleeping. So I'm like, you want to take off? He was like, yeah, take off. So I was just kind of waking up. I think we was making coffee or something inside the tent because I got a stove. So we're making coffee in the tent, and it's probably about a 10-minute drive from the trailhead where we were at, where the cars were, or my Jeep was parked. It was probably about a 9-minute drive to the main road, which was a fairly big highway. Not big highway, but it was like a 2-lane, like interstate maybe. And it was right on a curve. And so we're sitting there drinking coffee, and I hear what I think it sounded like a tractor trailer tipping over. It was loud. I'm like, that had to be a wreck on the highway. And that was all we heard. We just heard a big, loud, sounded like metal, boom. And so we get up and we start getting ready, start packing up. It took us probably about an hour, maybe an hour and a half to pack everything up. Walk to the Jeep, throw everything in the Jeep, take off. We get out to the road. I'm expecting to see debris everywhere. I'm expecting to see cops. It was that loud, and there was nothing. I'm like, well, what did we hear? It was very weird. And that was that trip. That was the only weird things on that trip.
Did
Then
you happen to look around to see if there was train tracks anywhere close by?
No, I haven't. But I could probably Google it on Google Maps and look and see if there was anything around there. I never even thought about that, but that's a good idea.
The train tracks aren't too far from here, and every once in a while we can hear the trains, but I used to live in town right by the train station where they'd stop, and you'd literally swear someone has gotten a huge accident. It was just the cars from them stopping, slamming, and it always sounded like huge accidents.
Hitting each other.
Yeah, so it always sounded like huge accidents happening when they were hooking up or something. So anytime someone says they hear like a metallic like bang, like a crash or something, that's the first thing I think of is like about 10 years ago when I used to live in town, I used to hear that quite a bit because the depot was behind me. So I don't know the exact location. Like, it's interesting to me because that area does have lots of reports of Bigfoot stuff. That's actually where I just was back in September for the first annual Bigfoot conference they had in Indiana.
Yeah, I looked all this up after, and I was like, holy cow. Even the ridge that we were on, there's some BFRO or whatever reports of the same ridge that we were on.
Yeah, there's...
I'm not seeing any tracks.
Yeah, it might not be anything there. Especially in the wooded area, it's hard for the sound to travel. Now, the only thing I was thinking of is if it's because it's still somewhat in the wintertime, you don't have all the leaves, so you'd have more of a sound. You'd be able to hear it more because there's more opening. Because we can hear the tracks more from where I live now because in the wintertime. In the summertime, you don't really hear, but every night I can hear a train whistle. That's the train, and the tracks are a good 3 or 4 miles from here, but it doesn't sound like it's that far away just because there's nothing stopping it, like all the leaves and stuff are off on the trees. I didn't want to derail the conversation or anything, but that's just one of the I would forget about if I didn't ask.
Now, I'm not seeing anything. I'm looking right now, and they're,
Okay.
I mean, we were in the middle of the national forest. I don't think they would have tracks running through there. But, so yeah, that was really weird. I thought for sure we were going to see this huge wreck on the road when we pulled out, but there was nothing. Then the next incident that we had was, I don't remember when. I think it was the following spring. No, it'd have been the following fall.
I don't remember. What year did you say this was?
That was 23.
Okay, so just a little over a year ago.
Yeah. My buddy, he's part of a hunting club up here in this area. And he has a key to the spot. So during the winter, or when, it's not in season to be there, like, during the summertime, people go out there and camp. It's a big area that they got. There's 2 ponds, fish ponds, and that's right off the Kankakee River. So a lot of people hang out there when it's warm out. Not too many when it's cold. So we went out there. We was going to do some hot tent camping, and it was flooded. So when it's floods out there, because the Kankakee overflows, there's only a few like narrow, not real narrow, but probably about 40 yards wide sections that connects everything, and then the rest of the land is just flooded. And we're out there, we get camp set up. That's the one with the pin that I dropped.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's got a bunch of little red dots. So closest to the river is the first drop, not the pin, but the first little red dot. It was probably about 11 o'clock at night. We had a few beers, just hanging out, and we hear what sounds like somebody throwing a softball-sized rock into the water. Like, what the hell was that? It's cold out there. The only thing that would be out would be beaver. You know what I mean? Maybe, muskrats, beavers, stuff like that. But it wasn't a splash. It wasn't like a branch falling off a tree. And, I guess a branch could if it was like small but thick and fell just right. It would, because it went kerplunk, like something heavy and dense going into water. Everybody knows what that sound is.
Right.
So it did that. And I'm like, what the hell would that be? And he's like, I don't know, probably a tree branch or something. I'm like, maybe. And then maybe 10 minutes later is this next drop. It does it again. Kerplunk. I'm like, my first thought, because there is some houses out there, but mind you, it's cold out. It's probably 30 degrees. It's flooded. It's like there's no lights. You would see somebody with a flashlight. They're not going to wade through, 5 foot of water to come out and prank a couple of guys. And and the whole place is fenced in too. And we had the gate locked, so nobody was coming in. And so it did it again. And I look at him like, are you sure it's tree branches? And he's like, I don't know. Then it did it again. Further south, did it again. Further south, did it again. Further south. And it just kept doing it all the like in a half-shaped moon from it'd be our east side, and that whole area is flooded completely. It was just really crazy. It was kind of scary, to be honest. And it did that, and that was the only thing that happened. So, I asked a few people, I'm like, what would make that noise? What would do that? The closest thing I got was when I talked to my dad. I was like, what could that be? He was like, well, maybe you said it was flooded. Maybe the bank was falling away. I'm like, that's the best thing I've heard so far, but it's all gradual out there. There's no steep banks out there. So I don't know. It was just weird. And the funny thing is, we went out there several times after this time, and we heard it, but it was always in the same spot. It was always about where the second red dot is from the river. And it happened once or twice every time we went out there, and that was it. And it stayed in that same spot, which was really weird.
I'm trying to think what could be a natural explanation, but I can't think of anything.
I can't either. And it was the same sound each time. Kerplunk, like something like I literally, because around the pond, they have the big white shirt, the big ones.
Mm-hmm.
The next day, I went out there. I'm like, hey, listen. And I picked it up and I threw it up as high as I could, which ain't too high. I mean, it's softball sized chirp. And it went into the water, and he was like, that's what it freaking sounds like. I'm like, yeah. So what animal is making that noise?
Right.
He was like, I don't know. But it did it every time we went out there after that. That was the first time. And then it did it like three more times. And then the last time it did it, we was out there. I had just set my tent up. It had just gotten dark. And I had a couple beers in me. And it did it again. And I had more than a few beers because I really don't even remember this until he mentioned it. The next morning, we're walking around. I think we walked out to the river. I was like, hey, guess what? I was like, what didn't happen? He was like, what do you mean? I'm like, that noise didn't happen. The noise in the water, it didn't happen this time. He was like, yeah, it did. You don't remember? I'm like, no. He was like, you freaking snapped off and was like, I'm fucking out here having a good time. I don't need this shit tonight. And he said it didn't happen for the rest of the night. So, which I kind of remember saying it, but yeah. But that was the last time that happened. And so those are, I want to say Bigfoot, but I don't know because I didn't see anything. But you hear all the stories, and all that stuff lines up with the stories that people tell.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know.
Before I started this show, I have a buddy, and he goes fishing a lot, and he fishes out at Miss Cinnamal area.
Mm-hmm.
And he told me about, and I don't know if he was on like his little, it's not a canoe, but it's like a kayak or whatever. So I don't know if he was in that or if he was on the bank, but he talked about rocks being thrown at them. Now you can't rule out people doing it.
Right.
And they weren't like small pebbles. They were enough to make a plop in the water like where you're describing. So, but they never saw where they were coming from. But where they were coming from, they were coming with a lot of force to hit the water to make a bloop, like a splash in the water. They weren't fish jumping. They were something going into the water. But every time they'd look around, it was coming from the bank, but there was nothing at the bank. So I believe he was actually on his boat or whatever, in his canoe or something, when the things were being thrown at him from the bank. Again, Could kids or people be out in the trees doing it? Sure. Why do you want to be an asshole? I don't know. But, or could be something else.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm pretty stumped on the whole situation, but I have my theories.
Were you ever interested in Bigfoot before, or is this kind of what got you into the whole phenomena of it because of what happened?
No, I've always been interested in it, but I was always like, I don't know, maybe not. Somebody would have found, something by now. But even since I was a kid, though, it intrigued me. Didn't really start researching it too much until after this.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'd listen to a few podcasts here and there, but after this event, like, it literally took over bad. Like, I started trying to listen to everything I could listen to. It was real weird.
What does your buddy think about it?
He's kind of in the, because I started sending him, podcasts. Listen to this one. Listen to this one. Listen to this one. And he was like, yeah, it all sounds like the same shit. So,
yeah. There's a lot of very close similarities between people's descriptions of what they hear and what they experience. So it puts things in a perspective of either people are experiencing similar things or people are hearing someone else saying it and they're copying what someone else is saying. What is the point of someone going out? Let's just say you're 100% making this up. What is the point?
I have no idea. That's why I believe when I hear these stories, I'm like, well, I'm not going to get rich off this. So what, and I've talked to family members and I've talked to people at work. I'm not the one to shy away. Like, I don't care what you think. Mm-hmm. So, but I've had, my family, my dad and all, they're like, what?
Yeah.
Crazy. Like, whatever. Don't believe me. I don't care. But it happened.
That's exactly how it typically falls on people that talk about this stuff too, is unless someone else is there to experience it, a lot of times you say you had this experience, people are going to be like, okay.
But like I had somebody with me.
Right. So do you plan on going back for more? Like, do you plan on going down there to try and, I know that
afraid.
I know they have a lot of stuff that goes on down there, at least from what I've been told. When I was at the Bigfoot conference, a lot of people were there. I was actually surprised by how many people actually came out to it. And I talked to quite a few people, but I've only had one lady actually do an interview that I met from there. But a lot of people stop by and talk to me about the weird stuff that happens, and they live in that area. I wish that they would reach out to me because there's a lot of stuff that I was told that I'd love to talk to them about. Again, the notion of people always making this stuff up because they want attention, or it's why? Like, you're not going to get rich. You're going to get ridiculed about it. You're going to get made fun of about it. People are going to say you're crazy. Like, that's all that you're really going to get from stuff like this. And I know by saying that, it makes people not want to even come forward about it, but that's the stigma that needs to be addressed, is people experience something. They're not all crazy. They're not all wanting attention. Something's really going on, but Joe Public just wants to write it off as people are crazy or wanting attention.
Yeah. And I've spent a lot of time in the woods, like even as a kid, and never had anything weird like that happen.
This is where I struggle sometimes. I've talked to other people before I ever did this show, kind of like you, an outdoorsman, and they don't have experiences and they're completely shut off to the idea of stuff like this because they've never experienced it. But because they didn't experience it themselves doesn't mean that other people aren't experiencing something. But there's no open-mindedness to it. It's literally, I've been in the woods. I've never seen it. There's nothing out there. But you've never been everywhere at once.
Right. And I was like that too. When I first started my channel, I was doing solo completely. I've done one solo since. I'm a little nervous about doing solos now. But my buddy, he has a farm, probably about 15 minutes south of the hunting camp. And he allows me to go out there on his land because he's got quite a bit of land. And he's got a nice set of woods out there. And I went out there and I'd camp out there all the time. But I had a couple of things that I didn't really think of. Like, I didn't think nothing of them until this happened. I'm like, I wonder if that had something to do with it too. Because 15-minute drive from where I experienced the rocks being thrown. And I don't know. I don't know if it had anything to do with it, but the first incident there on that land was I did a overnight hammock camp, and just went into his woods and set up a hammock. So his land is like, I guess you'd say, is a country mile. You know, he has the corner, and he's got most of it is farmland that he leases out, but then there's a section of woods, and he's clear at the other end. His house is. So I'm out here in the woods. The only house out there is a abandoned house that was across the street, which is kind of creepy looking. I kind of want to go check it out. But so it just got dark. I was filming. I was making some ramen. Got my ramen all made, sitting there in my hammock eating, and I thought a deer walked up on me. That's what I was thinking. I didn't see it. I used my bright ass flashlight, and I could see almost to the edge of the woods on all sides except for the east and west, because it's kind of narrow and long, the set of woods. But I could see the north and south edges of the woods, and it sounded like it was to the north of me, and there was nothing there. But it sounded like a big ass buck. That's what I was thinking. So I'm like, it's got to be a deer. And then, so I lay down in the hammock, try to go to sleep. And I'm laying there, and I got this overwhelming fear. So I'm like, I don't know why I'm freaking out right now. I had to pretty much fake the video. I got up, walked all the way to my Jeep, and slept in my Jeep. I don't know what it was. I don't know why I felt like that, but I was terrified.
I've been told by people before that are out in the woods all the time. Again, it's just conversation, not stuff that's been recorded or anything. But they've been out in the woods and they completely get overwhelmed by a fear of something. They can't explain why. They didn't see anything. Nothing even happened, but literally they just became so overwhelmed by fear that they left because they just felt like they were not supposed to be in there for whatever reason.
That's what I felt like. I was like, I got to get out of here. And I've slept in that woods several times. Only one time after that, because he does have a little spot down by the creek that is set up for camping, but I wanted to do the video in the woods. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So the other thing that happened there, it could have been nothing. It was wintertime. The creek was flowing, but there were still pockets of ice. I was eating breakfast. I just made breakfast. And to me, what I thought it was a large shelf of ice breaking off. It literally sounded like a big deer jumped into the creek and broke the ice. Now I could see the creek from the campsite, and I seen big chunks of ice float down because it would be to my east, and it flows east to west. And I saw big chunks of ice float down after that. It was loud. I was like, had to have been a deer, or maybe just the ice warmed up and broke off, but it was loud. That's the only two things that's happened there. Could have been nothing, but
it's hard to ever know for sure, though, like, it's without seeing something.
right.
But then you add up all those other things that go along with it, then you're like, is it actually something else going on? Is it natural? Like, it's hard to ever come to terms with things. And honestly, if you've seen something, sometimes it's hard to come to terms with that too.
Yeah, I'm kind of up in the air about seeing something. Like I want to, but I don't know if I want to. Hopefully if I do, it's at a distance. But like down in the Hoosier, we went to the same spot twice. The first time was overwhelmingly calm and felt great. The second time, same spot, was creepy. I don't understand that. And I don't know.
It goes back to the feeling of not
right.
It's something environmental that changes the whole dynamics. Now, the thing that I've noticed, and I'll ask you here in a second, but like when you felt like you couldn't be in there, was there any noise at all, or was it dead silent?
I don't remember. I just know that while I was eating, it sounded like the deer came in.
Mm-hmm.
But I never saw the deer. So that was the only noise that I remember. It could have been quiet. It wasn't something that stuck out to me.
Yeah.
But the first time we went, and it was super calming at the Hoosier, it was like you were in a vacuum. Like, I don't know how to explain it, but the noise, it was so quiet, even though it wasn't terrifying or scary.
Mm-hmm.
It was like you could watch somebody walk away through the leaves. You know how loud the leaves are in the fall.
Yeah.
And it was like once they got a certain distance, the sound just stopped. It was real weird.
So I'm not much of an outdoorsman in the sense of camping and stuff. I've camped here and there, but usually when we're camping, this was back 20 something years ago. We used to camp along the river because we were out doing dumb drinking and other stuff. Like we weren't doing just to go out there to do it. Like we went out there to camp to have a party.
Right.
But I go through the woods, and I haven't done it for a while, but I disc golf a lot, or used to. And a lot of those trails were around wooded areas and stuff. So we go through there, and out by the dam, there's a course out there. And you go through the wooded parts, but again, it's opened up, it's maintained or whatever. And I've seen stuff out there that I don't ever relate it to anything Bigfoot. But then when you start hearing stuff from people, then you're like, well, does a person do this or not? Because I've seen like where the trees make the X's.
Yeah.
And I never thought anything about that. I've been doing this for 20 something years, and I've seen that shit all the time, and I don't think anything about it.
Well, that was the other thing out there at my buddy's property. Right on the trail, 2 big trees like this. You had to duck under it. I have it like I have a card that has my YouTube channel and everything on it. That I have me walking up to that. I didn't think nothing of it. I didn't know nothing about that.
Right.
But I took a picture of it because I was like, oh, this looks cool. It's
right.
like a giant X. And these were big trees. They were probably about 10 inches around.
Now, I don't try and say that that's Bigfoot doing that, but I also don't know what would have done it besides a person. And if a person did it, what was the point? Because I've seen some really big things. And I've also seen where they've been broken, like the trees rotted and it broke and it fell over. So
Right.
I'm not going to say that it's not a natural thing, but then I've also seen things where trees are completely bent over and it looked really weird. And my friend's like, oh, it's probably from like snow, like heavy wet snow bent it over and it just never came back. It's like, why wouldn't it have snapped off at this point though?
Right.
So I've seen weird stuff here and there, but I never once ever related it to like Bigfoot. Not
Right.
until like the last years upon years of listening to stuff. Like in the last 5 years, I started listening to podcasts and I started learning more about Bigfoot stuff. Like I watched Finding Bigfoot and stuff about it, but it was never anything that I thought was around here. Like the idea of Bigfoot, I was like, well, Pacific Northwest or down in Florida or whatever, Texas. You don't think about Bigfoot here in your own backyard half the time.
That's how I felt, my whole life until 2023.
Right.
It's like, oh, it's not here.
I remember there was an episode of Finding Bigfoot and they were down, I think, in Bloomington area. Now, I actually had someone reach out to me back in the spring, I think it was. So it's been almost a year. And they were asking me questions about these things coming up on their property. I didn't do an interview with a person or whatever. Like they were asking how to keep them away. I was like, I don't even know if they even exist. Like I've never seen one. So I don't have any idea how to keep something away, but I recommended getting like lights, like big spotlights or whatever, like on motion censored. For some reason, that seems to be one of the things that keeps things away. And that was down around, it was a lake. I forget what lake it was, but it's down around Brown County, which I think is where the Hoosier National Forest is at, around Bloomington.
Right, Lake Monroe.
I think that's what it was, yeah. I was going to call it Monrovia, but it's Lake
That's
Monroe.
the lake that we walked to.
Okay. Yeah. This guy supposedly had just moved into this house and it had been abandoned for several years. And when they moved in, it upset whatever was apparently living around that area because they weren't used to people being there after so many years. At least that's what I was told. I can't verify anything that people tell me. It's just, why would someone make it up? Like, what's the point?
Yeah, I don't get it either.
But I said, especially if you're not even going to come on an episode. Like, what's the point of randomly getting a hold of me and be like, man, what can I do to keep these things away? Well,
right. Well, I actually ordered a few cheap trail cams to start taking with me, just to point at my tent, just for a little more security.
If you do a lot of looking into things for some reason, and I don't know how everyone knows this, but they claim that Sasquatch knows there's cameras there. They know what a camera is and they won't go near it. I was like, how do they know?
Well, I heard they can see a spectrum of light that we can't, which is IR.
Right.
Which maybe, you can see where, I watch a lot of trapping YouTube, and the trail cams, you can see as soon as the trail cam kicks on, the coyote or whatever will look at the camera and take off running.
Mm-hmm.
So if they can see it, what's to say something else can?
Yeah. Because we only see what we can see with our eyes. Animals see differently than us. If it's a flesh and blood animal, like there's all different spectrums of the colors. And if you get a full spectrum camera, you see things that you normally wouldn't see with our naked eye. So who's to say that something can't see the IR light? Who's to say they can't see the light that shines from it, or some of these cameras have like a little infrared sensor on them. So we don't see it, but I think it shines like that little red light on it every once in a while.
Yeah.
So it makes sense to me that they could see that. But this is me being, not trying to be like argumentative with people, but I don't like when people tell you things as a fact.
Right.
Like, this is what happened. They know this. They did. How do you know that?
Right.
Like, has there been a body does Bigfoot tell you? Well, I can see that. I don't like when people come out and tell me things like, well, this is how it is. Okay, well, where's your proof?
Right.
So,
I mean, the other thing that makes me think that it's possible is, I don't know if you ever heard about the night vision goggles that they had in Vietnam.
Yeah, I've mentioned that a time or two. Someone else talked about where they could see the things flying around that.
Yeah. That's crazy.
That's a story that I've always thought was interesting, and I know it's impossible at this point, but I wish I could have talked to someone that was experienced that.
Right.
But it's like everything else. Like, where did the story come from? Like, is it a true story? Is it just an urban legend? Like,
well, it was enough to the government to change the night vision very quickly.
yeah, because they went
I
to
think
green.
they got it changed in like 6 months.
Yeah, they stopped doing red to green.
Yeah.
It's
So obviously there was enough people having issues with it for them to say, "Yep, we got to stop this."
which makes me want to know like what they used back then, because now I want to get a pair to go outside and look around, but then I'm gonna freak the shit out of myself.
Right.
I don't want to see it flying around.
They say that it's there's something that's in the glass that's bad for you, but I don't know. But I have looked it up. I can't remember the name of it. You can you're supposed to be able to still get glasses that have that lens in it, but I don't know.
Yeah,
You have to find out what it starts with a D. The chemical I think it starts with a D.
I don't trust things anymore to where
No.
they claim they're going to do something, and who's to say it really is true? Then you spend all this money
Right.
getting something and you don't see anything. You're like, oh, there's nothing there, or you just spent money on something that's complete bullshit.
Look up. I think they might also be called aura glasses. So supposedly you could see people's auras with them. They're in like the hippie
Yeah.
stuff. So I think that's the same thing. If you can find them for cheap, try them.
Do you have any opinions on what you think Bigfoot actually is?
No, I have no idea.
That's exactly the answer that I would tell people. Like, I know some diehard flesh and blood people, and I know some people who go down the whole rabbit hole of the woo side of it, of there being some sort of a weird ethereal supernatural type thing, and some people think they're aliens, and I'm like, I just want to know, I just want to see something. And
I'm on the if I had to say something, I would say it's all of it.
it would be, I know, like with, if it's not flesh and blood, why does it leave footprints? Okay,
Exactly.
well, but where do the footprints go? And then half the time I always thought it was strange you only find like one footprint. Well, it's only got 1 foot. Is that why I call it Bigfoot? Because he just has one big foot. But, and then you find other people that talk about how, like the lady that I'd interviewed, she's actually from up north, kind of not too far from you. She says she has Bigfoot on her property, but to her, they are her spirit guides. They are from a different plane of existence to where they come in there and they guide her and everything else. And I'm like, I don't know about all that, but this is what she says happens to her, and who am I to say one way or the other if that's real or not real?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there's a lot of things that come to this world that to me sounds, as an outsider looking in, if I was just a normal person not knowing anything about any of this stuff, and I hear some of the things that people talk about, like, these people are batshit crazy. So I understand why there's the stigma when people listen to stuff and they're like, they've never had an experience. But since I've actually had something happen to me that I can't explain away, I'm more relatable to people that talk about this stuff, because at this point I'm like, hell, it all could be true. I don't know.
Yeah. I seen a ghost when I was about 13.
Mm.
And that kind of freaked me out. But it wasn't like, oh, it was like you could tell what it was. It was a flash of white real fast. Two people were standing in the doorway between the kitchen and living room. They both fell forward for no reason. And I seen it went around the corner. And that was kind of trippy.
The only thing that I've ever seen, and I don't know what it would have been, is like those weird, I've seen a little shadow thing run down my hallway, and this was just this past year. But
I believe you. I lived in a haunted house in Kokomo on Taylor Street. It was an old Victorian house over there in the Victorian area with all the Victorian houses. And I lived there for 2 or 3 years. The upstairs was completely remodeled. The downstairs was all old-fashioned. Beautiful place. I had an incident, and I asked the guy across the street, I'm like, hey, I was talking to him. I was like, man, I had something weird happen over there. And he was like, that place is haunted. I'm like, and I'd already been living there like 6-7 months at this point. And I'm like, well, what do you mean it's haunted? He's like, you didn't hear? She didn't tell you? The lady I rented from, she didn't tell you? I'm like, no. He was like, go to the front door right now, because I'm at his house. He says, go to the front door and look at your front door. So I go to his front door. I'm looking out there. And I'm like, what am I looking for? He was like, you don't see it? I'm like, no. He said, look at the top of your door and look at the black marks. So I'm looking at it. I'm like, oh, I see it. What the hell's that? And he was like, that's where the smoke was rolling out. He's like, you ever wonder why your whole upstairs is remodeled and the bottom isn't? I'm like, didn't really think of it. And he's like, there was like a 7 or 8-year-old kid up in his bedroom playing with matches and caught the whole upstairs on fire. And I guess the kid died from smoke inhalation. And that was about 4 or 5 years before I moved in there. And I think the reason that I brought it up to him was I'd came home from work and I was dog tired. I'm sitting there watching TV. I smoked cigarettes at the time. And I start nodding off with a cigarette. And I shit you not, something went right on the top of my head. I could have swore somebody was standing there. Now, at the time, I had a roommate living with me. But from where I was sitting in the living room, I could see all the way to the stairs, and I could see all the way to the back of the house. If somebody would have done that, I would have caught them with my eyes before they hit the stairs or before they hit the back of the house. I go running upstairs. He's asleep in his room. He's sitting in his recliner, sleeping. I started freaking out. I'm like, what the hell was that? And then that's when I talked to the guy across the street the next day, and he was like, yeah, the house caught on fire. And it's probably something saying, hey, you're about to burn the house down. Because I fell asleep with a cigarette in my hand.
yeah, that
Crazy.
That is definitely something that I would relate to. If that is a thing, and that kid actually died there, I could see something to where it would warn you for the whole instance again. But you said this was on Taylor.
Yeah, West Taylor.
This is actually, I believe it's on East Boulevard. But I have an episode called The Boulevard Hell House. And it's about in Kokomo. The girl that I'd interviewed is one of my friends. She used to live there, and she swore it was like a demon house. So it's not too far from there. But
The other thing that happened there is sitting in the living room, and supposedly there used to be, I don't know how true it is, they used to have funerals in the house. They had these big pocket doors that blocked off the dining room from the living room. And I'm sitting on the couch watching TV. And out of the corner of my eye, I could see into the dining room. All the lights were off. I think I might have had like a little night light on in the kitchen. But I saw what I thought was a cat run from the kitchen around the corner into the dining room. So I'm like, is there a freaking cat in my house? And I didn't have any pets at the time. I jump up and I'm looking, and there's nothing in there. Like, that's weird. That's real weird. And then I think it was probably about, I don't know, a half hour later, I'm sitting there watching TV, and from the dining room, I could see smoke rolling from the dining room into the living room through, under the doorway, but it disappeared as soon as it came into the light of the living room. Yeah, it was weird. It was like black smoke. And supposedly my mom had something happen to her there. She came down from Detroit to stay with me for a few weeks. She was in the walk-in closet messing around with some of her stuff, like going through, just getting clothes or something out so she could take a shower or whatever. And she thought my daughter was there because she felt 3 little fingers poke her in like her hip and butt area. So she thought it was my daughter. She turned around and there was nothing there. So that scared the shit out of her.
You said 3?
2 or 3. I don't know. But yeah, I mean, she said it felt like a little tiny hand poking her.
I say if she specifically said 3, then that makes me kind of have other ideas. But
right.
The number 3 is very
significant
in a lot of paranormal stuff.
Yeah.
A lot of people get 3 scratches. They get 3 like fingerprints. They get 3 this and that, and then everyone thinks it's demonic.
Right. She said that she walked down the stairs, and it was a flight of stairs, a little small landing, and it turns back and goes down into the, I guess you'd call it the foyer area.
Mm-hmm.
And the place was huge. Like, the foyer was like the size of my living room right now. And she said she came down to the last little set of stairs, and she looked across the room into the living room, and she said that she seen, it was a ball, like the size of a softball, going across the curtains. I said, well, what did it look like? She said, it looked like a mirage. I'm like, what do you mean? She said, when you're driving and you see the heat coming off of the asphalt in the summertime? She said, that's what it looked like, in a perfect circle moving across the curtains. That's crazy.
I've heard, and this is completely off topic, but on topic. I've heard people talk about seeing these beings, and a lot of people refer to them as like cloaked, like the Predator.
Yeah.
I've never heard anyone refer to it as like a ball, but I've heard someone else refer to this. It didn't look like, they said it didn't look like the Predator, but it looked like when you see like the heat rising off the ground. So you're the second person that's mentioned this. But again, they were saying it was like a figure. I've never heard anyone refer to it as a ball, but the description matches up. Yeah. The description though matches up to what other people said they've seen.
Right. Yeah. I've heard that too. People say, oh, Bigfoot does that. I don't know how true it is, but I've heard it several times.
If Bigfoot is flesh and blood, like I know a lot of people believe, I don't know of anything flesh and blood that goes cloaking other than Bigfoot works for the military in a secret operation and he's got all the technology that we don't have. I don't know.
Right. I mean, there are, like biological things in our world that does change colors.
The chameleons, octopus.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, what if it's, something as far as like a frequency or vibration thing? If they can change their vibration, maybe they could do something like that. I don't know.
That's going on the woo side there, buddy.
It is. But like I said, I think it's all of it.
Yeah.
I think they're aliens and woo and flesh and blood all in one.
I think if they are, and again, I know I'm not a purist over here because I don't know anything, but
right, me neither.
For me, I think that they are just kind of like you said, they could be anything, but I feel like there's way too much stuff to say they're flesh and blood, but I'm friends with someone that's a diehard flesh and blood person. So it's like, and he's explained how the woo thing came about. So it's like, I don't know. There's just too many weird stories, but I interviewed someone a while back and it makes sense to me. He said that if we took Bigfoot out of the forest and we left it in a house and talked about all the experience that people have with Bigfoot, but it's in a house, we would say the house is haunted. There's poltergeist activity. But because Bigfoot's out in the woods, we don't say that. So he's basically like a forest poltergeist.
Hey, I'm right there with it because that's kind of, I'm like, I don't know what it is, but I was having weird things happen in the woods. Mm-hmm. Could it be poltergeist? Sure. I'm with it, whatever.
I honestly believe that is probably one of the more accurate descriptions that I've ever had anyone explain that makes more sense. Now, again, Bigfoot was just a hairy man out in the woods. I used to think he was like a Neanderthal descendant or something that evolved into Bigfoot. But nowadays, like, I lean that, you know what? It's probably some sort of supernatural being. But.
And maybe it is. And maybe, this supernatural being can make you see something. And it can make you see whatever it wants to make you see.
Now you sound like me.
So what's that?
I said, now you kind of sound like me. For anyone that follows along with these episodes, I just interviewed someone a couple of nights ago. And right before we ended the episode, I said, because we talked about Bigfoot, I said, what if all this stuff is connected? I was like, what if the things that we are seeing, we all see them because that's what is projected to us to see. It wants us to see something. I was like, so every time someone has an experience, you saw a Bigfoot, I see a dog man. This person sees something else. What if it's whatever these things are and they're projecting that to us? And then when I talked about this to my friend, he said, oh, so it's projecting something, but it leaves footprints. I was like, okay, well, I can't really explain that, but like.
But if it's physical enough to knock something off of a shelf, why couldn't it leave a footprint?
Right.
Because the only other paranormal thing I've had happen since I've moved up to the Northwest was here in this house. I had a 10 that it was, I think a knife came in. Probably about, that big, sitting on my dresser. Been sitting there for 2 years. And it just went flying off the dresser for no reason. Like, what the hell was that? You literally see the dust ring. Well, I don't know why that went flying off the dresser.
Right.
But it flew off the dresser flat like this and landed on the floor. It scared shit out of me because I was just chilling in my room.
So I'm pretty sure the house that I live in now is not super old, and I don't want to bore the audience. I've talked about it before and it's been on other episodes, but there's definitely something weird. And just weird things happen. I don't know how to describe it other than it's just very weird. It started as soon as we moved in. Things got worse, things got better, things got worse. We've been quiet for a while. So we'll just see what happens. Like I said, we don't talk about it. And this is someone claims it's not a good idea. I was like, but we don't talk about it because I don't want to give it power.
Exactly.
If there is something here, it can fuck right off. I'm not giving it. I don't want to talk about it. So that's just how I roll these days when it comes to this type of stuff.
Yep. Start looking at something and it might start looking back.
That is the warning I was told when I started this podcast. And I was like, okay. And then now I actually will warn people when they tell me they want to start a podcast. I'm like, hey, I just want to let you know that I was given this warning by a random person on the internet. I didn't take much to it, but I was like, now I actually believe it. I was like, so when you start to look into weird things, sometimes the weird things look back at you.
Yeah. And I think I'm in the camp that whatever's going on in this world right now, it's making it easier for these things to do whatever they're doing.
Or these things are what's influencing the world to be the way they are because they need us to be at that low vibrational frequency to feed on us.
Could be. I mean, yeah.
I had this conversation this morning with a buddy. And it's a personal thing with him, so I won't bring up his personal business of what was going on with him. But I told him, I said, what happens if the people that we think have something wrong with them, say that they're got psychosis or schizophrenia, they hear voices in their heads? I was like, what happens if the voices in these people's heads aren't from their own mind? I was like, I'm not saying that's all this way. I was like, but what happens if those voices are actually something real, putting those voices in those people's heads to do the screwed up stuff that they end up doing? The voices told me to go into the house and murder my whole family. Or what if that voice in their head was real? It wasn't just psychosis, it was or schizophrenia. Like it was actually something put in his head telling him to do these bad things, and he went and did it.
Yeah.
Because that's what these things feed on. And he 100% agreed, but he went the demon route with it. And I was like, I'm not saying demons, I'm not saying angels, I'm not saying anything. I was like, I'm just saying, what if there's something out there that is just straight up what we refer to as demons that have this ability?
Yeah. I mean, hell, it could even be, I mean, you hear I don't remember what they call it, but like the Havana with syndrome.
Havana syndrome, yeah.
Yeah. What if it's something like that?
I have people that have reached out to me from all sorts of places in the world, all different topics or whatever. And the one thing that I can say is I believe the people are experiencing something. And I honestly have no idea what it is. Like I can't tell someone that was a demon. I can't tell someone that the voice is in their head, that you're a schizophrenic person. I can't, because people say they hear all these, like they claim they're targeted individuals. So they hear these things. Well, I don't experience that, so I can't relate to it. But
right.
When an average person hears stuff like this, they're like, well, this person's just talking about schizophrenia. I get shit on a lot by people for letting them be on here saying I'm taking advantage of people with mental issues. Well, that's what I was telling my friend. I was like, what if the people that experience this aren't really, quote unquote, mental issues? Like, what if they're actually legitimately hearing something, but we don't take it that way because we were programmed to believe that there's something wrong with these people? We don't look at the fact that maybe the voices are actually something giving from like these voices are coming from somewhere else besides just their mind.
You ever looked into the Michael Hastings situation?
I recognize the name, but I don't know the story.
He was a journalist that was breaking a story about some shady stuff that the military was doing about a high-ranking colonel or general, well, his BMW ended up exploding, going down the road at 80 miles an hour. And he was putting out emails to family and friends that he was being followed, was hearing voices and all kinds of shit. But it would play music, and I think there was somebody that was sitting in the car with him actually heard the music at one point. It was like, I think that's the same story, but he ended up, I think somebody took over his car digitally, wirelessly, and made him wreck.
You just happened to mention something, and I'm going to talk to you off air about it. I'm not going to put a target on either one of us, so we'll talk about it off air.
Yeah, I was just thinking I probably shouldn't have talked about that.
No, we're all good. But we've been going on for almost an hour and a half, so we can probably wrap this one up.
All right. Well, it's been fun.
It definitely has been fun. It's been a pleasure talking with you. For anyone out there listening, you said you have a YouTube channel. Where can they find that? Like, what's the name of it and everything for them?
Live Free, Live Wild.
Send me a link, and I'll make sure to include it in the show notes for everyone out there if they're interested in checking it out.
All right. I haven't been posting too much, but there's quite a few on there. I think there's almost 100 videos. They slowed down after the issues.
Yeah. I don't blame you there. If you'd like to be a guest on Tinfoil Tales, remember to send an email to tinfoiltalespodcast@gmail.com or go to tinfoiltales.com and go to the contact section. Make sure to follow me around on all the social medias. And just remember, truth comes at a cost. Are you willing to pay the price?
I heard a story late last night about something lurking along the wood line. Huge footprints, strange lights in the sky. They claim it's nothing, but I know they lie. It's easier to laugh in my face, but something about this makes me say, what if it's real? What if they knew? What if the answers are coming from you? Spinning stories, wasting my time, hearing voices, is it all in their minds? They can call me crazy, but I just want some proof. What if it's true? What if it's real? What if it's true? What if the world's not what we knew? Tinfoil tales pulling me in, a story that starts where the logic ends. What if it's real? What if it's true? The answers are waiting, they're waiting for you. They see a dog man walking, or maybe a mothman flies above the buried giants, hidden beneath the lies. They say it's just stories, it's all make-believe. Fairy tales for the things we can't perceive. They want to keep us blinded, they want to break our will. But I'm not buying it, I'm not swallowing another pill. Force-fed poison, the lies we're made to believe. What if the truth could set us free? Alien signals traveling through time, secret space programs erasing their minds. They call them crazy, but I just need some proof. What if it's true? What if it's real? What if it's true? What if the world's not what we knew? Tinfoil tales pulling me in, a story that starts where the logic ends. What if it's real? What if it's true? The answers are waiting, they're waiting for you. They laugh, they lie, we all could die, but the signs are there if you open your eyes. Aliens, cryptids, demons, ghosts, the Nephilim too. What if it's me? Or what if it's real? What if it's real? What if it's true? What if the world's not what we knew? Tinfoil tales pulling me in, a story that starts where the logic ends. What if it's real? What if for you. It's all in our heads, it's all in our minds. These voices can't be silenced, the truth must rise. Tinfoil Tales, it's pulling me through. What if it's real? What if it's true?